What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. I'm your host, Mason Kenahan, and today I am joined by the one, the only, Sam Prince, to break down and preview Washington's upcoming matchup here in Week 2 against the New York Giants. Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Mason. Thank you for having me on today.
Yeah, I'm doing fantastic too. Beyond the point, I feel like I'm a little sick or something because my voice has just been gone for the last 2 days. But beyond that, uh, the Washington Commanders enter this week 0-1. The Giants enter this week 0-1. We'll start with the quarterbacks because I feel like that's going to be probably one of the more main storylines heading into this game and pretty much out of this game as well. You want to start with Daniel Jones? What are your thoughts on how his season has played out so far and what it's looking like for the future at the quarterback position for the Giants?
Well, Mason, Daniel Jones should have gotten benched against the Minnesota Vikings. There's no reason for Brian Dable to keep him out on the field. Daniel Jones played like one if or not if the worst quarterback in the NFL on Sunday. Ever since Daniel Jones got paid his $160 million 4-year contract from the Giants, he has thrown more pick sixes than touchdown passes. So Daniel Jones, whenever he plays the Commanders, he cooks. He looks like Patrick Mahomes. But any other team, he stinks.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about because last week when they played Minnesota, a negative 0.415 EPA per play, which was dead last in the league last week. Daniel Jones was 29th in completion percentage over expected, 30th in air yards per attempt. It was disastrous for that Giants offense. But there's one team he always plays well against for no reason at all, and that is the Washington Commanders, and that's what I'm scared about because every statistic, every number that is out there tells you that the Washington Commanders should be great against Daniel Jones. That defense should be
Yeah.
good against Daniel Jones this upcoming Sunday.
Well,
But wait,
according
go
to
ahead.
ESPN's analytics,
Hmm.
the Commanders are favored and they have a 59.4% chance to win this game. But you also look at this Giants offense. Last week, you couldn't blame the offensive line. Brian Table's play calling was not the greatest, to say the least. Daniel Jones was not good. Daniel Jones' confidence, he's just shot. Like just he just knows he sucks. Which is the saddest thing in the world because I really feel for the guy. He's a really good dude, and like you want your quarterback to succeed, but it's at a point. It's like when you just get rid of him? When you just get rid of him? But let's talk about Jaden Daniels, who I said out of this draft, coming out of the draft. I think I told you this too.
Yep.
Jaden Daniels was my favorite quarterback out of the draft. I said he was the best quarterback, better than Caleb Williams. Jaden Daniels. Yes, I know you're looking at me like crazy. I know everyone's still looking at me like crazy by saying that. Telling you, this man's talent is crazy. Look, yeah, he rushed for 2 touchdowns. Did not get a passing touchdown last week. 184 yards in the air. But I think this is Jaden Daniels' year to bounce, to really pop out. And this is the Commanders, the first quarterback that in my lifetime, I'm sure in your lifetime, ever since RG3, that could be the face of the franchise
Hmm.
long
Yeah,
term.
yeah. I mean, this is definitely the first year in a long time where Washington Commanders fans actually have hope in the future at the quarterback position. You look at the last few years, who Washington was starting at the quarterback position. 2023 was Sam Howell, which was the closest thing we had to a young quarterback in a long time. Ryan Fitzpatrick started a week one. Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke, Case Keenum even at one point was starting week ones for us. So this is the first year where you actually have hope that this guy who will be starting week one is going to be here for multiple years. You're almost like 100% sure that he's going to be starting here next year. Daniels, though, in his opening game, looked back at the film, and after all of that, it definitely was a little bit more of a struggle than I think the stats originally show. 17 of 24, 184, and 2 rushing touchdowns, like you mentioned in the box score. But he only had 3 attempts farther than 10 yards down the field, and he only completed
Well,
one of those. He was 7 of his 17 completions came from behind the line of scrimmage on screens, on checkdowns. The passing game was not working for the Washington Commanders last weekend, and I mean, you could see why. It was a lot of Daniels looking at one read, 1 to 2 reads, nothing's there, he's gone. And that's also somewhat because of the offensive line just being as bad as it was, one of the worst offensive lines again. For the Commanders, 9 pressures allowed for that offensive line. But overall, you could see the talent that Daniels had, like you mentioned, something that he that coming out of the draft, people loved about him was that he can create with his legs. He can create out of structure. And that's what he did last weekend because the stuff in structure wasn't working that well.
Obviously, every rookie's going to have his growing pains. And Daniel is going to have his growing pains. But you look at this Washington offense, who's really protecting him? And who's he throwing to besides Terry McLaurin?
Yeah, it's interesting to see because Noah Brown is going to be coming back this week. He was signed by the Washington Commanders about a week before week 1, and he was healthy and active, still learning the playbook. So he'll be making his Commanders debut this weekend. Potentially some help in the receiving game there. But Terry McLaurin was pretty much a non-factor last week. Olamide Zaccheaus was pretty much a non-factor. Your leading receivers were your 2 running backs and Zach Ertz. So who is he throwing to? One of the worst receiving units in the NFL. And then in terms
Exactly.
of
So you
block,
really can't blame him that much for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, but also at the same time, it wasn't like they weren't creating separation. I do think it was a lot of just Jane Daniels processing, realizing, hey, this is NFL defenses now, right? You got to throw with more anticipation. You got to get to your reads quicker than he had to at LSU. For him, it was a lot of fades down the sideline, a lot of post routes, some stuff off play action. Like it was more built for him, and he was definitely more comfortable with it. And you could tell since he played 5 years in college, he got used to that college defense. Now this is a step up, like you mentioned. There'll be growing pains, but still, you want to see some more development. I'm not saying last week was like horrible or anything. I'm just saying going into this Giants game, you want to see a step up from his performance last week.
You do, but it's look, Mason. Let me ask you this question: how confident are you in your tackles?
Okay, so here's the thing, right? Last week at left tackle, you had Brandon Coleman and Cornelius Lucas. Cornelius Lucas was the one that started. Then the 3rd-round rookie Brandon Coleman. He was in there for 3 drives. The Commanders scored a touchdown on 2 of those drives, right? And you could tell I really loved what I saw out of Brandon Coleman. I was not thrilled by the pick originally back in April because I thought that they would need to spend a higher draft capital on a top tier tackle, but through one game, I expect him to start now against New York. He was coming off of an injury, so that's why he didn't really play that much last week. But if he's going to play the entire game now this week for Washington, I'm looking forward to it. And I think he's going to be there's a good chance he's our franchise left tackle. On the other end, however, with Andrew Wiley at right tackle, that's where things get interesting. So
It does, and Mason. All I'm going to say is this is the game of the weekend of Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns to absolutely stat pet against the Washington Commanders.
yeah,
Kayvon
it's
Thibodeau absolutely tears it up against the Commanders.
mhm.
He has his best games against them. All I'm going to say is you're going to be watching the Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns sack this. This is going to be a low-scoring game. It's going to be like a 17-10 game. But win or lose, Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns are going to have themselves a day.
Yeah, I think that's a good transitioning point to just the Giants defense overall. It was bad last week, but it wasn't as bad as the offense. 26 in EPA, 23rd in success rate. Dexter Lawrence, however, had one of the best games out of any defensive player last week in the entire league. In 22 pass rush snaps. Wait, you go ahead. You want to say something?
Sorry.
Uh,
Dexter Lawrence is arguably right now the best defensive tackle in the game. It's
mhm,
either him or Chris Jones. You get an argument. The Giants secondary, you want to know the saddest thing? It was so bad, but there was also no pass rush. That was the Giants defense was so bad that no one's even talking about how bad it was because of the offense was just god awful, tremendous. If Daniel Jones in a couple more plays scored 2 touchdowns, we'd be talking about this Giants defense having major concerns. But we're not talking about it because the offense was so awful.
mhm. Yeah. The defense, the secondary, definitely an issue. But like you mentioned, Lawrence was getting pressure on the quarterback. He had a 50% win rate on his pass rush snaps, 92.3 PFF grade, which was number 1 among interior defensive linemen last week, number 4 across all defensive players in terms of pass rush grade. And like I mentioned earlier, the Commanders' interior offensive line, is not great beyond Sam Cosmi. Now, Tyler Biotish had a good game last week, didn't allow any pressures, but Nick Allegretti struggled. Again, Brandon Coleman is going to be playing in his first full NFL game most likely, saying that he plays the entire time. And then even if Lawrence is lined up like out wide against Andrew Wiley in some fronts, like it's going to be a struggle. Jane's going to have to get the ball out quick. I assume that Cliff is going to want to prioritize the quick game just like he did last week, along with a lot of runs with Robinson and Eckler. So, yeah.
So for you guys, I think you guys are going to use Brian Robinson a lot. He's going to be someone who I don't fear for him. Like when he comes on the field, I don't say, "Oh, Brian Robinson." I'm scared. I feel like he's going to have himself a day on Sunday, which I'm also interested in. You also mentioned Austin Eckler. You're going to use him more as an RPO, really a pass catching back, because I feel like for you guys and just in general, Austin Eckler is not a quote unquote running back. He's just a utility player.
Right.
If you use him properly, like the Chargers did 2 years ago, he can have 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was three, my bad. And you can have himself look like an all pro again. But I just don't know if Cliff Kingsbury is really going to use him like how he's supposed to be used. Because remember, I believe he said in an interview, I don't remember with who, he said the reason why I didn't resign with the Chargers because they wanted me to run every down. So what is Austin Eckler really now for you guys? And really in general, because you have such a talented weapon. And are you going to use him correctly? Because I don't really feel like any team is right now.
I think Washington definitely last week used him in the right way. He was lined up a lot on third downs. It was like the team was down for most of the game. It was pretty bad from the start. So Jane was passing the ball a good amount, especially in that second half. Eckler was one of his main check down targets. He had 4 catches or 5 catches, I believe. He was the leading receiver for this team last week. So it's I think Cliff knows how to use him correctly. I don't know how much I didn't know. Okay, coming into the year, I didn't know how much juice Eckler had left. He showed some flashes last week, especially on one catch when he had like a nice little spin move and broke a tackle. Picked up like 15, 20 yards. But I just don't know how much juice, especially down the like throughout the rest of the season, he has left, just because of the usage that he had in LA.
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. I see that with him. I think he's got a little more juice left. I think he's got 1 to 2 more solid years, and then it's just all downhill for him. But you go to the Commanders, you go to your pass rush. I gotta say, I mean, the Giants' offensive line is not perfect or anything. Who in the defensive front should scare me?
Well, yeah. So, if we want to focus more on like the Giants' offensive line, real quick, like
Sure.
there's it's definitely better than last year, especially with the addition of Jermaine Illuminor. It looks so much better on at right tackle than it did last year. It
Yeah,
was it looks so
Mason,
much
you know
better.
how sad last year's was? When you have an average offensive line, that makes me
Mhm.
so happy. I love offensive line. Like that wins you football games, wins you championships. But yeah, no. It, it's not gonna hold up. Let me just savor this moment of average offensive line play. It's a great moment for me.
Yeah. I mean, I would like same position as you. Last year, one of the worst offensive lines, the 70 sacks or whatever it was last year. It was bad. But yeah, so the offensive line will definitely be better, and I feel like it's always kind of good against the Commanders. It's just if Daniel Jones holds onto the ball too long, like runs out of the pocket for no reason, that type of stuff is where negative plays get bad. But you go ahead.
Listen, it's the same thing every single game, every single week, every single year. Can Daniel Jones play well? And I am sick and tired of this. I cannot wait till that man is benched. Okay? He he makes Giants fans lose their minds off of him. Because do you know those players in sports where it's every year that player is going to do well? Every year that player is going to have a breakout season. Every year. That's Daniel Jones. In his rookie season, he had 27 passing touchdowns under Pat Shermer. Do you think he's had a better season than that? No. You know what his next best season was? 15 passing touchdowns when he beat the Minnesota Vikings in a playoff game, and he gets rewarded for doing that. Yes, I do think he should have got paid some money for that because he won a playoff game. same amount of playoff wins as Dak Prescott. But point that out for that. It's just mind-boggling how Daniel Jones still has a starting job in the NFL. You saw Malik Neighbors comment after he was not happy with Daniel Jones as quarterback. Look, it's going to lose the Giants football games. It's going to lose jobs for Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen if he's still in. Because I'm not saying Tommy DeVito and Drew Lock are better talents, but when Tommy DeVito came in, you just saw this moxie and this confidence in him. Yes, he ruined the Giants getting J.J. Daniels. I was very upset about that down the stretch. But look, I know I'm going on tangents here, but there's
You good?
no moxie. There's no confidence in him. He can't play outside the pocket. He reads one route. That's it. He doesn't look around the field. He's not quick on his feet. He doesn't have it anymore. His neck is still aggravating him. And I just think teams like, well, you go down the stretch of the Giants, Browns, Cowboys are just going to absolutely kill him in the line if he keeps on playing. And it's going to ruin jobs. Mason, the storyline I'm really want to watch tomorrow is how on Sunday, is how Deontay Banks locks up Terry McLaurin because he thought he was going to get commander. He wanted to be commander.
Mm-hmm.
And for some
Don't
reason,
even talk about what happened that
they
draft.
didn't draft him.
Okay, before we get into that, I want to get back to Daniel Jones. Two things. One, guess who the fastest ball carrier was last week for the New York Giants? Daniel Jones. At 18 miles per hour, that guy was zooming down the field. Okay, two, Daniel Jones is going to get benched at some point this season. It will happen. Now, the thing is, what happens when you guys are a 3-win team when he gets benched? And then Tommy DeVito comes in. Okay. Two or 3-win team. Because it'll be later on in the season, right? So imagine, like, when you're
I
a
think
2 or
he gets
3-win
benched
team.
earlier.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a conversation for different time. But when you're a 2 or 3-win team, right, and Tommy DeVito comes in and he picks up 3 more meaningless wins for you guys, and you guys get put out of getting a good quarterback in the 2025 draft, what's going to happen then? Because we know that's happening. So what's your reaction going to be like?
Mason, that's the worst nightmare, and it came true last year. When you beat the Commanders, the Patriots, the Packers, I was on the floor being like, okay, this win is fun in the moment, but this is killing the future of this organization.
Yeah.
I do think Daniel Jones does need to be benched. I still think with Drew Lock, you guys are still winning this game.
Yeah, I know. We're gonna be winning this game for sure. But also, I feel you last year. The amount of praise Greg Zuerlein got when the Jets and Zuerlein knocked down like a 52-yard field goal as time expired to beat the Commanders in Week 16 last year. The amount of praise Zuerlein got from the entire Commanders fan base. We were donating to his like charity and everything. Like,
and it sucks to root against your own team.
I will say that, but also it sucks. Sometimes it has to be done.
How long can a fan base keep on doing that for? Because the problem is they're going to win 4 games this year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to get you Quinn or Carson back. That's the harsh reality of it.
Yeah.
But you also need to bench Daniel Jones so he doesn't get the injury bonus next season. So you save money in the cap space when you release him. That's it. They're in a sticky situation.
Mm-hmm. This is the first year on his new deal, right? Or second?
Second year.
Second year? Okay, so you can cut him after this year, right? Because it's only 2 years of guaranteed. Okay. All right, so you guys will be free of him after this year. It's just going through it. It's going to be tough. All right, well, I know you got to get going. So one last thing, score prediction. Who wins? What's the score going to be like?
Commanders win 17-10.
17-10. All right. That's interesting. I'll get to mine later on. I'll text you it. So, but
you text me. Mason, thank you for having me on. Sorry, I gotta cut short. My bad.
You good? All right. Thanks for hopping on. Wait, where can people follow you and all that real quick? All your stuff.
Sam the Prince 14 on Twitter and Instagram.
All right. Sounds good, man. Thanks for hopping on.
Of course. Thank you very much for having me.
That was Sam Prince. You can follow him again, like you mentioned, Sam the Prince 14 on Twitter. You can I think he has a podcast too that you can follow him there as well. Now, with that, I'm going to move on to the Washington Commanders. What do they have to do to win this game? I'll start with the offense. The offense, 6th in EPA per play last week, 4th in success rate. That's right. This team actually had a competent offense. Not only that, but a top 10 offense in efficiency metrics last week, which I don't remember the last time that happened for the Washington Commanders. Now, looking back at the film and watching the game live, you would not think that this offense had that much of a success and that good metrics that high enough in this league. But I think it was also just a poor performance overall from most offenses last week, which kind of led to this. The Commanders were also top 10 in both dropback and rushing EPA. It was a surprisingly good offense last week. And Jane Daniels was pretty much one of the main reasons of it, because just his scrambling, his ability to create out of structure was kind of major, especially on a bunch of third downs. So the offense, I think, is going to have success as long as they're able to protect Jane Daniels on Sunday. Now the secondary, beyond a guy like Deontay Banks, it's not deep. That secondary is not deep. Easily, Sam mentioned it, but it's like you can easily exploit this secondary. And I know the receiving room for Jane Daniels is not great, but Noah Brown, like I mentioned, is going to be playing in this game. We're going to see how much or for how long Noah Brown actually plays. He'll be his Washington Commanders debut on Sunday. And then the offensive line, that's the problem. That's the thing that scares me. Brian Burns, Dexter Lawrence, even a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau, who for some reason always plays well when he's playing the Washington Commanders, but doesn't play well against anybody else. Those three guys going up against Brandon Coleman, who will be making his first NFL start and playing in his second NFL game ever, because again, he did not play in the preseason because of his injury. Andrew Wiley, who led up multiple pressures last week for the Washington Commanders. Allegretti wasn't great. Sam Cosmi was fine, but nothing incredible last week. That's what scares me, especially what the Giants defense is going to cook up in terms of different blitz schemes and all of that. I'm scared. I'm scared for Jane Daniels. Last week was pretty bad. Daniels, for the most part, the offensive line was fine. It wasn't good, but it was not as bad as some moments last year. They gave Daniels some time on some plays, but that was going up against Shaq Barrett. Is Shaq Barrett even on the Bucks? I don't think he is. He's going up against Yaya Diaby and Vita Vea and those type of guys. And those are good players, but also now you're going up against a all-pro caliber player in Brian Burns. You're going up against Dexter Lawrence, another all-pro player from last year. It's going to be hard for this offensive line to give Jane Daniels time and expect to see a lot of quick game for this Commanders team. A lot of quick stuff, just like last week. Don't really know how many deep shots Jane is going to be able to take, especially if the offensive line is not holding up. Now, that would be the goal, is for Jane to take more deep shots than he did last week. Last week, it was really only one pass, I think, beyond 20 yards. And again, that's one of Jane Daniels' strengths, was his deep ball in college at LSU. Hopefully we see more of that this week against New York. So yeah, Jane Daniels, hopefully there's more deep passes, but it's really going to depend on how much the offensive line is able to hold up and give Daniels time for those deep routes to develop down the field. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball. Defense, I mentioned it last week. It was the worst performance from a defense. It looked the same as last week. 31st, not last week, last year. 31st in success rate, 32nd in dropback EPA, 31st in dropback success rate. Looked the exact same. The secondary was horrific last week. And now, no Emmanuel Forbes. That news came out this week. Emmanuel Forbes he had successful surgery actually today on his UCL, I believe, in his thumb, or successful surgery on his thumb. So he will be out for 4 to 6 weeks. It sounds like maybe 5 to 7, somewhere around there. We'll wait and see if he gets placed on injured reserve. I think that move or that decision will be made after the game against the Giants, maybe today at some point. Actually, I don't know because of the surgery, but we'll have to wait and see on that. In the meantime, I expect someone maybe like Bobby Price to get called up from the practice squad for this game, especially since they're a cornerback down. Now, Emmanuel Forbes wasn't incredible by any means last week against Minnesota, but that's a guy who's been taking first team reps all summer long and into training camp throughout the preseason. That's a guy who's been taking first team reps. So it is a hit in terms of a guy with a lot of reps under his belt, especially in a younger secondary going down, and he's going to be out for a while. So you're going to have to kind of put your hopes on Noah Igbenogany and Michael Davis and whoever gets called up from the practice squad, whether it be Chigonuzium or Bobby Price. But yeah, this secondary hopefully will be better. I definitely feel like Malik Neighbors is going to burn in this defense multiple times on Sunday. It's just going to be if Daniel Jones will be able to get the ball to them. And I mentioned it with Sam, that pass rush, I think it's going to be harder to get pressure on Daniel Jones than it was in previous years, mostly because Evan Neal isn't playing at right tackle. So there's still some concerns I have about this Commanders defense for sure. And if they look like the 31st and 32nd ranked defense again this week, I will be majorly concerned. But still, I think that they will perform better. I hopefully think this will be a bounce back. You're going to have Benjamin St. Juste starting on one side. I would expect Noah Igbenogany to be the starter on the other side because once Emmanuel Forbes got benched last week, it was Igbenogany who came in for him. So I think Igbenogany is in front of Forbes in terms of the depth chart. I expect Mike Sanders still to play in the slot like he did and in the box last week. I posted a cut up of his on my Twitter at Mason_Kinahan if you want to watch that. But yeah, that is pretty much it for this episode. One last thing before this one ends. Score prediction from myself. Sam gave his 17-10 Commanders, he said. I agree with him in terms of it being a very low-scoring game, but my score prediction is slightly different. I'm going to go 20-12. The Commanders pick up their first win of the season at home at Northwest Stadium, whatever it's called. Northwest Stadium, I think. Commanders Field. I think it's Northwest Stadium now. So 20-12 Commanders. I don't think the Giants score a touchdown the entire game. I think this is coming from the 12 points are coming from 4 field goals. You can say that's my hot take for this game. The Giants don't score a touchdown, and instead they get 4 field goals. So 20-12, 2 touchdowns and 2 field goals for Washington. Oh, I forgot to mention the kicker situation. No more Cade York. He got cut already. And then now they have, let me pull it up. I forgot his name. Hold on. They signed someone new. Austin Siebert coming in now for Washington. So hopefully no more kicking issues for Washington. But yeah, that is it. So that'll do it for today's episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. Next episode will be out on Monday, recapping the game against the Giants. Thanks, Sam, for coming on to the podcast. That'll be it for this episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. See you guys next one. Peace.